All right, welcome back. Today, we are going to pull back the curtain on the one single most important rule that drives pretty much every business decision on the planet. I'm serious. From your local coffee shop to the biggest tech giants, they all live and die by this one principle. So let's get right into it.
You've probably looked at a company and wondered, why'd they launch that product? Or maybe, why are they hiring so many people right now? Or even, why did they only open 3 stores and then just stop? It can feel kind of random, right? But believe me, it is not. It's all governed by a very, very specific logic.
And yeah, it really does come down to one single golden rule. Now, to get our heads around it, we're not going to stare at a bunch of complicated spreadsheets. No way. Instead, we're going to follow the journey of a brand new business, Clara's Coffee Cart. She's going to be our guide to understanding the real heart of business strategy. Okay, so first things first. Before Clara can even dream about making a profit, she's got to figure out what it actually costs her to even open up shop. And look, this is a little more complicated than you might think, because there are actually 2 very different sides to the cost coin. So on one side, you've got what we call explicit costs. These are the super obvious ones, right? The actual checks Clara has to write. We're talking about the rent for her spot, the wages for an employee, the cost of coffee beans and milk. It's basically any money that physically leaves her bank account. But then you have the other side, the hidden or implicit costs. And for Clara, the biggest one is probably the salary from that marketing job she quit to start the cart. Think about it. She's not paying that money out, but it is a very real cost of her decision. It's the opportunity she gave up. And this is exactly why economists don't just care about regular old accounting profit. They look at what's called economic profit. Because really, this is the only way to know if Clara is truly better off running her coffee cart than she was at her old job. It's the real honest-to-goodness measure of success. Okay, so let's break Clara's costs down into 2 main buckets. The first bucket is for her fixed costs. These are the things she has to pay no matter what. Like the monthly rent for her spot. Sell 1 cup or 100, that rent is the same. The second bucket is for variable costs. These are the costs that go up only when she sells more coffee, like the beans and milk for every single cup. And trust me, knowing the difference here is absolutely crucial, because only one of these costs is directly tied to her very next sale. Now look, knowing her total cost is fine. It's good information, but it doesn't really help her make those critical day-to-day decisions. For that, we've got to think on a much smaller scale. We need to think at the margin. And folks, this is where the real magic happens. This is the secret sauce. So the most important number for Clara isn't her total cost at all. It's her marginal cost. And all that means is this: how much extra does it cost her to make just 1 more cup of coffee? Not the average cost, but the specific individual cost of the very next one. And you're about to see how that one little number changes absolutely everything. Okay, so if we were to actually plot out Clara's costs on a graph, you'd almost always end up with this really distinct U-shape. And I know it looks like some weird graph from a textbook, but it's not just abstract theory. That curve tells a very real, very human story about what's actually happening at your coffee cart. So here's the story that graph is telling. When Clara first gets going, the cost to make each cup goes down as she sells more, right? She gets into a rhythm, her whole process becomes super efficient. That's the downward slope of the U. But eventually, things just get too crowded. Imagine she hires another barista. Now they're bumping into each other, getting in each other's way. Orders get mixed up. That tiny little cart becomes a bottleneck. And suddenly, the cost to make that next cup actually starts to go up. That, my friends, is the law of diminishing returns in action. And it's what creates the upward slope of that U. And there's this really cool little mathematical relationship here. Just think about your GPA for a second. If your grade on your marginal test is lower than your average, what happens? Your whole average gets pulled down. But if you ace that next test and your grade is higher than the average, your average gets pulled up. Well, it's the exact same principle with business costs. And what this means, which is pretty brilliant, is that the marginal cost curve will always, and I mean always, cross the average cost curve at its absolute lowest point. That intersection, that's the sweet spot. That's the point of maximum efficiency for Clara's cart. It's the cheapest she can possibly produce a cup of coffee, on average. All right, so we've got a pretty good handle on costs now, but that's only half the story, right? To find our golden rule, we've got to look at the other side of the ledger, the money that's actually coming in. It's time to talk about revenue. So the money coming in, That's her total revenue. And it's a super simple formula, just the price of a coffee multiplied by how many cups she sells. But the real question for any business isn't just the total. It's about that first part of the equation, the price. How much control does Clara really have over what she can charge? Well, a company's power in the market completely shapes its revenue. So, if Clara is just one of 10 identical coffee carts all packed into the same plaza, she is what we call a price taker. She pretty much has to accept the going market rate for coffee. Maybe it's $3. But what if she has a secret, world-famous recipe and she's the only cart for miles around? Well, now she's a price maker. She has real control over price, and that changes her entire strategy. And hey, just like we had marginal cost, you guessed it, we also have marginal revenue. And it's the exact same idea. It's the extra cash Clara gets from selling just one more cup of coffee. You see where this is going, don't you? We have the cost of making one more, and now we have the revenue from selling one more. So there we have it, the two key pieces of our puzzle. On one hand, we've got the cost of making one more cup, and on the other, we have the revenue from selling one more cup. It is finally time to bring them together and find that perfect, profit-maximizing sweet spot. So, what is it? After all this, what is the single, golden rule that tells Clara exactly how many cups of coffee she should sell each day to make the absolute most profit possible? The logic here is actually incredibly simple, but it is so powerful. Let's just walk through it. Say Clara makes $3 in revenue on her next coffee, and it only costs her $1 to make it. Her marginal revenue is way bigger than her marginal cost. Should she sell that cup? Of course. She just pocketed $2 in pure profit. But now let's fast forward. Later in the day, that next cup still brings in $3, but her cart is crowded and inefficient, and it costs her $4 to make. Now her marginal cost is greater than her marginal revenue. If she sells that cup, she's actually losing $1. So absolutely not, don't sell it. So the crucial insight is this. She should keep making and selling coffee as long as the money she gets from the next cup is more than what it costs to make that next cup. And the moment they become equal, that's where she stops, right there. And that is it. That is the golden rule of business. A firm maximizes its profit when it produces at the exact quantity where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. MR equals MC. Not one unit before and not one unit after. That is the very peak of the profit mountain, and every single rational business is trying to find that exact point. You can almost think of this as a super simple dashboard for any CEO. The goal is just to keep producing as long as you're in that top row, adding a little bit more profit with every single sale. But the moment you slip into that second row, you're actively losing money on each unit. The entire art of business is just staying perfectly balanced, right on that razor's edge where the two are equal. And really, that's the biggest takeaway here. This simple little equation, MR equals MC, it isn't just for a coffee cart. It is the fundamental logic guiding huge decisions at places like Apple, Ford, and Amazon. In a way, it's like the hidden operating system of our entire economy, quietly deciding how much of pretty much everything gets made. But this leaves us with one last really fascinating question. If MR equals MC is the ironclad key to profit, then why on earth do we see so many startups and new tech companies intentionally lose billions of dollars for years on end? What do they know that this rule doesn't seem to account for? Well, that is a puzzle for another time. Thanks for joining me.